So this is Module 5, Exercise 1. I'm going to first create a project. Again, a blank one. So, cool. So now we have a project, Expense Event Receiver. So we're ready to add a new item. So here we're adding a list item event receiver. Right click, add new item, item receiver, list item event. Okay. Cool. All right, then we're going to run this against a custom list. Item has been added, item has been updated, item has been deleted. All right. So after the wizard do his thing, now we have I have a VP project. So we have the first method we are copy and pasting called update property back. It's just a site-wide variable, keep track of the sum total of the expenses. And we have a couple of methods: item added, item updating, and item deleting. All right, so these are the three events that we are handling. When the item is being added, okay, so someone's adding a new item, we're going to retrieve the invoice total and pass that to update property bag. Same applies to item updating. Okay, we're going to get the before value, the after value, and work out the net change. Pass that again to the utility methods. On deleting, get the before properties, pass that in. So in this exercise 2, we're provided with the expenses web part. Exercise 2. All right, it's a very short snippet of code. That goes into the render content. All right. So all this web part will do is read that property bag that we have been maintaining using the event receiver. Think of our event receiver as a ledger for all the changes that happen in the expense list when things have been added or updated or deleted. And the purpose of this web part is to simply use that property bag to write a little paragraph: estimate departmental expense total is such and such. So a web part will use the property bag to read the expense total. All right, so once the web part is deployed, okay, we have a list called Contaso expenses, and that is the source, is our source of data. And at the same time, this is where the event receiver is used to populate the property bag. So while it's working on it, take your time working on it then. It's under sales.contaso.com. All right, so I'm going to edit this page and put that web part into its place. So here's our expense web part. All right, so right now there is nothing to display. I can save it. Okay, so there's no expense at all. Now I'm going to create a new item into the Contaso expense, and this should test if the event receiver is triggered. Alright, so that's invoice date. Alright, so if it's going to blow up, it's going to blow up just about now when the event receiver runs. But if it's not going to blow up, it's just going to work. Alright, so what does that do? Oh, let's go back to the home page. Alright, so notice the estimate department expense total is 100, so there is a piece of data available for the web part to display. So that's the exercise 2. Alright, so folks, the time is 4:45. We're going to have to be punctual because it depends on the centers. People may have to leave and whatnot. So we're going to call a wrap on exercise 2. Tomorrow, by the way, you can save your virtual machine. Okay, so by using action, save. This will hibernate your virtual machine, so tomorrow you can pick up where it's left off. And I'll have exercise 3 video ready as well before I upload them. So, alright, exercise 3 is to write a timer job on a different site. Now, that timer job will collect information from the Contaso expense and give an overview to a different site called managers.contaso.com. So we're going to start another project to define the timer job. It will be a SharePoint 2013 empty project. Alright, this is going to also be a farm solution, and instead of sales, we are going to deploy this to manager.contaso.com. Managers. Alright, in here we're going to add an existing, actually we're going to add a new class. And this class will be called Contaso Expenses Overview Timer Job. Okay. Alright, so in this class we're going to add 2 referenced namespaces. Okay, the 2 referenced namespace includes the SharePoint.administration and the Microsoft.SharePoint namespace. And the class must inherit from SP_job definition. Now the class should have a default constructor as well as a parameterized constructor. These are just ceremonial methods, okay, methods that must be there. Okay. Now the constructor takes in string variables, the web application to associate with the server, and other parameters. Okay. The execute is the actual job code. So this is what happens when the timer is triggered. The job is only responsible for running code. It's not responsible for scheduling. It's not responsible for which server it's attached to. It all depends on the deployment. Now, in the next step, we'll create a feature receiver whose job is to schedule this. Okay. All right. So just quickly, this is going to get a reference to the managers.contaso.com and identify a list called Expenses Overview. Whenever this job runs, we are going to clear up everything in that list. So deleting everything. And then we're going to use the server-side object model to find all of the site collection hosted in the same web application. So if we have a few departments, we're going to loop through each and every one of them. And for each department, let's find out if there is a list called Contasso expenses. Now, if the list exists for each site collection, we're going to add up all the expenses, all the invoice total. All right. And we're going to extract the department name by using the URL. Okay, so whether it's HR or sales and so on. So we're going to split the URL and simply looking for the first part, and that becomes the title of our overview entry. Okay, so in other words, the purpose of this timer's job is to go to each department site, goes to the Contasso expense list if one exists, add up all the expenses, called the department total, and add an entry in the overview list, expense overview list. All right, so that's the purpose of this timer job. Adds one item per department. Now our job class is okay. Let's make sure we compile it and not seeing any error here. Our next step is to associate this with a feature event receiver so that we have a way of delivering or installing these timers jobs. So to do that, we're going to turn our attention to the features. After all, we need a feature receiver to deploy that, right? So, and we don't have a feature yet. So add a feature. Let's call this feature expense timer job installer. Okay, and it will be scoped to a site collection. All right. There's no item to include because this is not a declarative component. So let's save that. That's probably a good idea to rename this as well. Okay, we're going to rename this to Contasso expenses overview timer job installer. So that's the name of our feature. All right, in this feature, we're going to go ahead and add a feature receiver. All right, so here we're going to right click and say add an event receiver. All right, so in the add event receiver, on feature activated, okay, so our goal here is to delete. If there's any existing timer job, we want to delete it and recreate the timer job. So for that snippet of code, let's go to E drive, lab files, start again. Okay. All right. So we have a helper method called delete job. So we're going to paste that helper method somewhere. Okay. So that's the helper method. Pretty much ignore that. Okay. Now there are a few namespace issues. Let's make sure we address them. Okay, and that's that namespace. All right, so and notice the timer job is a constant that has to be declared. All right, so the constant string timer job name. So that's the name of our timer job, and our helper method is to make sure the web application does not already have this timer job defined, and if so, delete them. All right, so in the feature activated, that's when we are going to deploy. All right, to deploy this timer's job in the lab code snippet exercise 3. This is the code. We're going to copy. And paste into the feature activated. All right, so first we are using the properties to get a reference to the web application the feature has been deployed to. And let's make sure we call the help method, so no outstanding job will be left. Okay. And we construct a new instance of the Contaso expenses overview timer's job. Sets a schedule to run every 2 minutes. Okay, it's a SP minute schedule. It runs every 2 minutes. Associate the schedule with the timer job and call the timer job update. And on the same token, whenever the feature is deactivated, we want to make sure that no outstanding job will be left when the feature is deactivated. All right, so let's go ahead and deploy this timer job. All right, so it looks like the deployment has succeeded. Let's go to the managers.contaso.com. And there's the expense overview. So you see that apparently the job hasn't go out to finish collecting all the expenses yet, so it gives some time. All right, so after waiting for a bit over, because the schedule is every 2 minutes, so if you wait for a little bit, the timer will kick off and it will populate this list. And going forward, every 2 minutes, the timer job will collect the updated expense total and reflect in this list. All right, so that concludes the lab 520488.